Hello, all you beautiful people in Webtown. Welcome back to John Delarose Appreciation Week here on Crypto Comics. Today, we will be reviewing the comic book adaptation of The Ember War by Richard Fox. Richard Fox is a graduate of the United States Military Academy and spent nearly 10 years in the U.S. Army, including being deployed to Iraq twice, where he earned a Combat Action Badge, a Bronze Star, and a whole host of memories. He has written 3 thriller novels and 1 historical fiction war novel about the Red Baron. The Ember War saga begins with this book, which is 424 stunning pages of science fiction action. The Earth is doomed, but humanity has a chance. In the near future, an alien probe arrives on Earth with a pivotal mission to determine if humanity has what it takes to survive the impending invasion by a merciless armada. Fellow science fiction author John Delarose, after having completed his first foray into comic books with his popular comic Flying Sparks, decided to adapt Richard's Ember War to the medium of sequential art. Today I'm going to review the first comic book issue, which is available on Indiegogo for a measly $4. But what I would truly recommend if you're interested in science fiction comics is to pick up the Ember War graphic novel. It is available also on Indiegogo in digital format for a measly $20. That gets you a 120-page PDF, as well as the Ember War ebook. I'll be speaking to John Delarose later on this week, and we'll ask him why he was compelled to adapt the Ember War into a comic book. But right now what I want to do is just show off a little of the book and give you my review. The Ember War Part 1, Humanity's Last Hope, is obviously adapted by John Delarose, as I said, with art by Jethro who was the artist on John's last book, Flying Sparks. It begins with this gentleman, Mr. Ibarra, getting a phone call late at night, which directs him to drive to the Delaney Supply Yard in Phoenix, where there has been a crash. Deep within the crater is an alien life form, which explains that his world is about to be invaded by an alien threat, and if they act quickly, they might be able to save humanity. What's kind of odd is that the sense of urgency in this comic immediately disappears when the alien tells him you only have 60 years to prepare. 60 years is a long time to get ready for something, and I found that kind of odd, there's no sense of urgency in this story. And immediately after this scene, we jump to the Ibarra Corporation's asteroid mining outpost, 60 years into the future. So obviously, Mr. Ibarra from the first scene has developed this mining colony. What's odd is the next time we see Mr. Ibarra, he is an old man having already prepared for whatever's coming 60 years into the future. Nothing is revealed about how he prepared for whatever's coming. And that kind of left me disappointed, left me with a lot of questions that I thought should have been answered in the first issue. And hopefully they will be answered throughout this 120-page graphic novel. The second scene begins with these space marines, for lack of a better term, going to the outpost because there's been no contact from it for days. The team leader says they're on the lookout for hostiles, and one of the soldiers under his command questions if it's the Chinese, while another questions if it's aliens. The team leader says there's no such thing as aliens. One thing that kind of bugs me in this comic book is there are some panels that feel a little redundant. A great example is these panels right here. They find the outpost desolate, devoid of life. He calls out, "North Atlantic Union Boarding Party, come forward and be recognized." "Nothing in here. Only one more room to check." "Huh. Someone left here in a hurry." This could all be condensed quite easily into 2 panels instead of the 4 that are used. And I feel that this is a theme that exists kind of throughout the book. I feel that we could have gotten a lot more story to draw the reader in, rather than stretching it out and creating panels that are really unnecessary. All this dialogue you see in the first 3 panels could have easily been put into the first panel, the wide shot from overhead, and that would have left more room on the page to progress more of the plot. Another thing that I found odd was a lack of explanation. We don't really understand the world that we're inhabiting. We know it's 60 years into the future, but there's some things that just don't make sense. For example, we have all these dead bodies, and they are hovering just above the ground, which makes no sense at all because nothing else in this outpost is hovering. As we saw in the previous panel, the people who inhabited the outpost left in a hurry, and all of this stuff is scattered across the floor. If there's zero gravity in this place, all that stuff would be floating too. So we can tell that the bodies are floating, obviously, because they cast a shadow. But why they're floating is never actually explained. All of a sudden, this giant machine comes to life despite not having an operator inside of it. The one soldier comments, "I told you there were aliens." All hell breaks loose and they fight this thing, but we never understand what's happened. Why did it come to life without an operator? Another thing I found odd was that there was a lack of explanation for technology. I hark back to the James Bond series. James has all these different gadgets, and the way they set those gadgets up is through the character Q. Q explains to James and shows him how each of the new gadgets work. That way, later on in the story, when James uses them, we accept it as being part of the story and being probable. If you were to watch a James Bond movie for an hour, and all of a sudden he starts using his wristwatch to shoot laser beams, you would laugh and you would be totally checked out of the story because it came out of nowhere and would be comedic. This is a very important part of the process of writing anything, whether it's a comic book, a novel, or a screenplay. So when the Space Marines use a certain type of technology that we haven't had explained to us, it just felt a little confusing and out of place. Whereas a spaceship or warp drive, we totally understand because we've all seen Star Wars and Star Trek, so we're acquainted with that type of technology. We understand that humans can build a spaceship and go into space, so we naturally believe that because it's part of this science fiction world. After leaving the outpost, they engage in a space battle with a Chinese ship called a Q-ship. This dialogue here says, "The Q-ship has weapons! Evasive maneuvers! Everyone, we have to get out of range!" Now what's odd about this line of dialogue from this woman is that on the previous page, the captain of their ship said, "Battle stations! Protect the colony ships at all costs. They're full of civilians." So why would he be directing people to battle stations if these Q-ships the Chinese build don't normally have weapons? It doesn't really make sense why they would be preparing for a battle with a ship that doesn't have weapons. Another thing that kind of bothers me about this is that the Chinese are never properly set up as villains. We don't know their motivation, we don't know what they hope to gain, and hopefully that'll be explained throughout the graphic novel. The problem I see, though, is that this is the first issue, and so those things should have been set up, because the goal, obviously, of an issue number 1 is to bait people into buying subsequent issues. Without knowing the motivation of either of the two villains that we know about, the Chinese and then an alien race that's going to come to attempt to take over Earth, we're kind of left confused and in the dark. But I will say overall that the world does seem like it's going to become an interesting world. I just think that as this was John's first adaptation of a novel into a comic book, there were some things that maybe he missed. If John was to get an editor who was completely detached from the book, that editor would be able to say, "I don't understand what's going on here, John." And then John would have the opportunity to go in and punch that up a little bit. I also think that the dialogue in this needs punched up a little bit. It's very simple, straightforward exposition. I don't hear the characters' voices when I'm reading it. It all kind of sounds like it's the same voice. Again, that's something that an editor or even a co-writer would be able to help with. It's easy to give the comic book script to the author of the novel and say, "Is this working?" The problem with that is that the author already knows the whole story. It came out of his mind. So he's able to fill in gaps that a person who hasn't read the novel will be able to point out, which is where the editor would come in handy. I do like the art in this book. Jethro Morales' work keeps getting better and better. And that's what I really love about independent comics, whether they're Comicsgate or not, is thanks to Indiegogo, you have these young creators, these newcomers who are able to really hone their craft and their skill, because every time an artist is able to draw another book, his talent level increases twofold. So I can only imagine where Jethro Morales will be a year from now, probably working for one of the big 3 publishers out there. Ultimately, the world that Richard Fox has built is intriguing enough that it actually makes me want to read the Ember War novel, whereas Jethro Morales' art makes me want to check out the graphic novel. So luckily for me and anyone else interested in science fiction, they're both available in a package deal on Indiegogo for $20. You get the 120-page digital graphic novel, and you get the Ember War ebook. That's over 500 pages of original content for a measly 20 bucks. Totally worth the deal. Now tomorrow on John De La Rose Appreciation Week here on Crypto Comics, I am going to review John's brand new comic, which comes out this week. It is the Flying Sparks Meta Man Special, and I am really looking forward to reading it. So I hope all you beautiful people in Webtown will join me tomorrow for that. In the meantime, please give this video a thumbs up. Please subscribe, hit that ding dong for notifications, and I will talk to you tomorrow here on Crypto Comics.